So, hello everyone, and welcome to this session of Sahaja Yoga meditation. Tonight, following the usual format when I'm here, I'll be given an introduction and then I will listen to a talk of Sri Mataji's. It's a whole talk, about 14 minutes, and sort of on a subject related to what I'm going to be talking about. And then we'll have the meditation. So, the subject tonight is beauty. I wanted to talk about beauty. A bit of this talk is drawn from my book, Art, Love and Truth, but most of it is new. What is beauty? It's notoriously difficult to define. There's something mysterious and irreducible about this quality. Besides, the subject of beauty is much greater than any definitions we might try to apply to it. Whenever one reflects upon the beautiful, one is brought up against a blank wall, says the French philosopher Simone Weil. Everything that has been written upon the subject is miserably and obviously inadequate because it is a study which must take God as its starting point. So I'm talking about real beauty, which is a transcendent quality, according to me and lots of other people. So I'm talking about this and not just prettiness. It's something I think that we as Sahaja Yogis don't talk about much, maybe because it seems to us that it belongs to the material world and is therefore too entangled with materiality, too insufficiently abstract to have much to do with the divine. Or maybe we feel there's a problem that insofar as beauty attracts our attention, it makes it hard to be detached in the presence of the beautiful. And as we know, the spirit is detachment itself. I'll come back to that at the end. Related to this is the idea that the beautification of things is a waste of money that could be better spent on more practical benefits. There's that story in the Gospels of a woman who comes in and anoints Jesus's head with expensive perfume, nard, when he's having dinner at the house of one of the Pharisees. In Luke's version, she's described as a sinful woman, and in John's Gospel, she's named as Mary, presumably Mary Magdalene. And in both their accounts, it's his feet rather than his head that she anoints, wiping them with her hair. But some of the disciples, according to Matthew and Mark's versions, complained about what a waste of money this was. Why didn't the woman simply give them the perfume, which could then have been sold so that the money could have been used to help the poor? And that's when Christ makes this very telling comment with many ramifications. The poor you always have with you, but you do not always have me. Interestingly, in John's version, there's one disciple rather than several who argues the point about the woman's offering being a waste of money, and that disciple is Judas. John adds that he didn't make this argument because he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief. But many have made the same argument since, whether they've been thieves or not, saying that decoration is unnecessary in the realm of spirituality, that the whole concept of beauty and adornment is actually anti-spiritual. It's worldly and has more to do with vanity than with spirituality. This has always been the argument of very right-sided puritanical ideologies, whether religious or political or cultural, and among other things, it led to the destruction of so much church art in England during the 16th century. Lately, I've become very interested in English choral polyphony of the Tudor period. It sounds rather kind of pretentious to say that, but this is very accessible and beautiful music. And it's horrifying how much of this amazing work was destroyed. To quote a modern commentator, the Protestant Reformation took a dim view of such popish decorations as professional choirs and the highly sophisticated Latin music they sang. All the elaborate polyphonic music of late medieval English Catholicism became, at best, obsolete. At worst, it was viewed as gaudy ornament to a despicable ritual. Many musical sources were destroyed, and if a manuscript escaped deliberate destruction by zealots, it might yet be subjected to other indignities. Writing in 1549, John Leland talks of people buying manuscripts from the monasteries which Henry VIII had abolished to clean their boots with or to use as toilet paper. One merchant bought the contents of 2 whole libraries in order to provide him with wrapping paper, enough to last him for a couple of decades or even longer. The result was that most of this music was lost. One of the greatest composers of the time was John Brown, not very well known, but really great, who died in about 1500. Yet only about 10 works of his survive, preserved in the Eton Choir Book, which was created around the time he died for the use of scholars at Eton School, where he himself had gone, and which is one of the very few large choir books that still exist, although a third of that one was lost. In the case of Edmund Sturton, another composer of the same period, we only have 2 works, and only one of those has been recorded as far as I know. They're both in the Eden Choir Book. And it's simply sublime and very unusual. There must have been more work, but we'll never know what it was like. But there you are. The dominant view in the mid-16th century was that this music was, if anything, anti-divine, and we would be better off if it were destroyed. It could be said that this turn to the right side, represented by the Reformation, did some good, in that it got rid of a great deal of Catholic conditioning. Or was it really necessary to get rid of so much art as well? No, it wasn't. We see a similar iconoclasm in the China of the Cultural Revolution back in the 1960s. In her great book, Wild Swans, Yung Chang tells us that in 1966, the young cultural revolutionaries who were taking Mao's order to turn against the 4 olds, including old culture, old art, they were taking this very seriously. They gave full vent to their vandalism, ignorance, and fanaticism. They raided people's houses, smashed their antiques, tore up paintings and works of calligraphy. Bonfires were lit to consume books. Very soon, nearly all treasures in private collections were destroyed. Many writers and artists committed suicide after being cruelly beaten and humiliated and being forced to witness their work being burned to ashes. Museums were raided. Palaces, temples, ancient tombs, statues, pagodas, city walls, anything old was pillaged. What comes across here and in the iconoclasm earlier on in Byzantium and the bonfires of the vanities in Italy, what comes across here is not just a right-sided conception of ideological purity, which believed that almost all art and decoration, things that were beautiful, they believed this to be redundant. But what also comes across is the malicious glee with which cultural revolutionaries and their kind were destroying everything. There was obviously an enormous amount of malice involved, and I would argue that although it's far more muted, we still see that same kind of malice today in our society. Now, If we're more on the left side of things, we can have a rather gooey, sentimental, kitschy sense of aesthetics. We tend to be impressed by lots of bright colors and by works that lack any shading, any sense of the dark side of things. We may be closely related to people who post pictures of cats on social media. We can also be impressed by gimmicky works of art. And we may also mix up beauty, or a kind of beauty, with eroticism. If we're more on the right side, however, we can lack a sense of aesthetics altogether. People who are very much on this side, or superconscious side, just do not feel the presence of beauty or its absence. But they can talk as if they're very up-to-date experts on the subject. This is how the ego confuses us. They might walk into a building and say, "What a fantastic space." But what is space? It's just space, it's air, it's nothing. But they're experts in making their opinions sound definitive. Just because they lack this aesthetic sensibility doesn't mean that they have no interest in the arts either. And in fact, many curators and critics and architects and indeed artists, even poets, have this right-sided view of the world, which is very dry. I've talked before about the dead aesthetics or anti-aesthetics of right-sided Bauhaus style architecture, the kind of modernist tower block architecture that was pioneered at the Bauhaus art school in the 1920s, and which has since taken over the world, and which Sri Mataji really said was evil. To my eyes, it's not just that it lacks beauty, however. The problem is that there's also an element there that is deliberately destructive of beauty. Looking around the city where I live, you get the feeling that the post-war architects and town planners who allowed these cold, dead buildings to disfigure our streets experienced a definite schadenfreude, a pleasure in the misfortune of others, in that they were spoiling things for people whom they believed were stuck in the past, were traditionalists afflicted with the sickness of nostalgia, and who were prone to feeling things which they, the new cultural elite, didn't experience themselves. It was during the 1960s, I would say it began then, really in earnest, shortly before the opening of the Sahasrara, that long-standing ideas about beauty, art, and high culture were subjected to a new kind of criticism in the West. High culture means what is considered, or what was once considered, because nobody likes to use this term anymore, with its elitist connotations. This was what was considered the most worthwhile, elevating, educative kind of art, including literature, music, and so on. Matthew Arnold, the Victorian poet and writer, who had introduced the term 100 years previously, explaining culture as explained culture as the disinterested endeavor after man's perfection, and that it was about knowing the best that has been said and thought in the world. This sort of agrees with Blake's view that poetry, music, painting, and sculpture as it exists in the remains of antiquity and in the works of more modern genius is inspiration and cannot be surpassed. It is perfect and eternal. Although Matthew Arnold was looking at it from a more cultural rather than a spiritual perspective. But as I say, in the 1960s, by which time most intellectuals and creatives, as they call themselves in the West, had entered a phase of Maya Kamala. This is the Sanskrit phrase which is very useful, in which the thought of God no longer entered their heads from one year to the next. And in that mood, they started challenging this idea of high culture, using the arguments of the Italian Marxist Gramsci. They claimed that it wasn't disinterested at all, and that so-called great art and beauty weren't actually timeless, and that high culture wasn't really high, but these things merely constituted what the ruling class defined was great art and high culture. And it was by this means that this ruling class had been able to impose its opinions on the working class and so maintain a grip on power. Once you accept this idea, which is basically a political and not an aesthetic idea, then you are led to the inevitable conclusion that anything that subverts or breaks with or is against the traditional view of what beauty is and what true art is, and so on, must be politically advanced, progressive, and on the right side of history. Thus, the floodgates were opened to the amateurish, the ugly, the insipid, and the vulgar in the realm of culture. I'm not saying it was all bad, but much of it was. It's interesting to note the words Srimataji sometimes used to describe negative things, and two of them are insipid and vulgar. Anything that could be considered elitist was automatically placed under suspicion, whereas mass culture now was considered great because it belonged to the masses, or so the masses were told. These days, the BBC, for example, is much more enthusiastic about mass culture than it is about what was formerly regarded as high culture, in sharp contrast to Lord Reith's original vision of the BBC's remit, which was to make high culture available to as many people as possible. It still offers the occasional show about some aspect of what was formerly regarded as high culture, but when it does so, it prefers to find some transgressive presenter such as Grayson Perry, the cross-dressing potter, to tell us what he thinks about it. As for the T.S. Eliot Prize for Poetry, one of the most important prizes here in England, Eliot being one of the last great advocates of high culture, not at the expense of popular culture, but alongside it. Nowadays, this prize tends to be given to people whom I suspect that Eliot himself, were he still alive, would cross the road to avoid, partly because of their lack of spirituality, and partly out of embarrassment at the fact that what they are writing is not, by any classical understanding of the matter, poetry. From the right-sided, supraconscious perspective, things showing any trace of the hand crafted, any sign of the human touch, tend to be considered amateurish, not properly functional and streamlined. That's certainly the case with most modern architecture and design, true with a great deal of the clothing we wear. I would say it's the same too with wind farms and solar farms. How good they are, how functional they are, how necessary they are, we are told. But what about how ugly they are? On the Mendip Hills, near where I live, there's a walk I like to take up a winding country lane through unspoilt countryside, past a ruined farm and beech woods, to a point where the lane gives out and you cross a field to the northern escarpment of these hills, the edge of these hills, where there's a wonderful view for miles over the farmland and lakes of North Somerset and into Wiltshire, except that at various points in the distance, they've erected some enormous wind turbines which tower disproportionately over everything around them. True, you can always find some contemporary artists like Anthony Gormley who will no doubt describe them as profoundly beautiful, but they're not beautiful at all, and I can't help detecting a sense of malice on the part of the people who put them there, whether consciously or unconsciously. They must have known very well how much some people would dislike these turbines, but I don't doubt that that only encouraged them the more. So what if their monstrous interventions ruin the landscape? According to Luke Sison, curator of the Fitzwilliam Museum at Cambridge University, English landscape paintings like those of John Constable can evoke, if we're not careful, dark nationalist feelings in those who like them. So it's a win-win situation for the people behind these turbines. Not only are they profiting from saving the planet, they are also spoiling it for those with dangerously patriotic feelings. Beauty is in short supply in the modern world, and yet God is beautiful and loves beauty. That's a well-known hadith of the Prophet Muhammad, meaning a saying of his that someone noted down. On the one hand, beauty points towards God. On the other, beauty expresses the spirit. A beautiful face, a beautiful landscape, beautiful building or work of art, beautiful poem or piece of music. These make us feel that we are in the presence of something out of the ordinary, something divine. Of course, there are meretricious kinds of beauty, which are alluring, but which bring no satisfaction. Beauty of the kind I'm interested in here has to be auspicious. Beauty and auspiciousness go hand in hand. Beauty is a thing which gives joy to your spirit, said Srimataji. What's more, she said that aesthetics is one of the two really valuable, or perhaps we can say spiritually valuable, aspects of matter. The other, of course, is that matter can express love. I mean, a chair or a car have practical functions, so they are valuable in that sense. But it is only when expressions of love and of aesthetics come into it that we can talk about the spiritual uses of matter. So the beauty that we're talking about has to be true beauty, has to be auspicious beauty. And if it is, then far from attracting us in the sense of encouraging us to be attached, to become lost in the world, it has a liberating effect. It instills silence in us. It makes us thoughtless. As John Keats said of his Grecian urn in his great poem of 1819, "Thou, silent form, dost tease us out of thought, as doth eternity." The auspiciously beautiful teases us out of thought. That's such a wonderful way of putting it. It takes us into meditation. It can even give us the idea with which Keats ended his poem, that famous statement that beauty is truth, truth, beauty. So thank you for listening so long to me, if you have been listening. And we're going to play a talk of Srimataji's, about 14 minutes, beautiful talk about beautiful things. So this is from India in 1987.
God Almighty created this universe in a very beautiful manner. I have told you many a time the story of creation and how the evolution took place. The mirror is made to see your face. And God Almighty could not see himself. His qualities, his greatness, his generosity, his magnanimity. Like the sun cannot see itself. moon cannot see itself. Like the gold cannot see itself. A pearl, how can it go inside itself and see itself? So, this creation was made like a mirror for God to see His reflection. Ultimately, He created the most beautiful mirror, that is human beings. At this point, it would have been all right if Adam and Eve had not used their freedom wrongly. There would have been not such a long time and had to go through evolutionary process with all the incarnations coming in, guiding people. And today, at this time, to get to your spirit, to express God in your mirror fully. This has taken a long, long process. But if you see, it's so beautifully done. I think that's the play of Mahamaya. That, first of all, beautiful worlds were created, beautiful stars were created. You see them around. Then beautiful mountains and rivers. Then beautiful plant kingdom came in. And the beautiful variety of trees. So much of varieties. Varieties brings forth the beauty of God's own imagination. A leaf of any tree cannot match with any other leaf, and also of the same kind. And a little thing like area of that leaf, there's a little variation which is mathematically, I think, raised to power 108 to 108, that you cannot make out, or you cannot create two leaves of the same type. It is God's own whim and His own wish that He has shown His variety and aesthetics in creating this wonderful world. But all His aesthetics have been worked out the best in the human beings. And human beings started expressing that quality of God in their creation. The creation started at the hands of human beings, expressed in such a manner that the beauty was brought in with the holy eyes of the holy men. In the beginning of the times, if you see, whether it is in the west or in the east, anywhere, people created temples like we have here, Ajanta, Ellora. We have caves and caves all over. But very close to us is this Ajanta caves, which was built in 10 centuries. It was cut out, hewn out of one rock without using any cement, anything. From top to bottom they started hewing it out and leaving it for next generation, next generations, might be 15 to 16 generations, might have done this tremendous task with such dedication and devotion and with such precision. Because of their holiness, because of their dedicated devotion to Buddha whom they had never seen. Buddha never came down to south. And they created such beautiful monumental work because they wanted to express the beauty of God's creative qualities. Even in the West, you have seen great artists like Michelangelo and many others who have created something of eternal beauty. Then there are people who started reflecting God in the musical notes and in the rhythm of this universe. Then there are poets who started singing the beauty of God and His greatness in their lyrics. That is how the beauty is expressed through the holy hands of holy people all over the world. I don't know nowadays if it is done so. Even in those days, at the time of Socrates, Lao Tse, philosophy was the dominating subject. People thought philosophy was the epitome of knowledge. But suddenly then it turned to economics, and that's the place where we lost our heritage of creativity, of the divine values, of the divine gunas. People started depicting things that would sell. And to sell the things, they had to appeal to the masses. And the masses, who were of very low-grade human beings, were pleased by very vulgar expression of beauty. That's how the vulgarity started growing up. Even in the language, this transformation took place, and people took to very cheap expressions of very superficial themes and very low-grade humor. The whole thing was based on giving a very mundane type of entertainment to people. On the music side, same thing happened. The music that was used to please the gods and goddesses was used to please the kings and the queens. And from them it came to the masses. And when it came to the masses, it became even a very cheap, frivolous music. Same about dancing, same about all the arts that were created to reflect the beauty of God, the mirror of God. All that we got from all the 5 elements was reduced to ashes by the value system that changed our ideas. The worst that happened to all the arts was that it was judged on mental level, not on the auspicious level. On the mental level, it was judged, of course, the money was very important. Though they may talk of big things, the color scheme and all that, it was the money part of it. The whole creation became a very prosaic, massive nonsense, which was sold in the market, all right, but was so temporary and so transitory that it went in the next generation into waste paper baskets. It has no intrinsic value of any sustenance, nor it had any joy in it. So it all got lost. In literature, we have seen how people have taken a complete juxtaposition to go to hell, I should say, and to carry all those who read them with them. The perversity of the literature has gone beyond any comprehension. All that perversity has to be avoided by Sahaja-yogis and have to be judged on the auspicious lines, because beauty must have auspiciousness. Anything that is beautiful must give vibrations, otherwise it is not beauty. If it does not give vibrations, then it is not beautiful. The coefficients of beauty is auspiciousness. It has to give vibrations. If it does not give vibrations, it should not be accepted by you as something beautiful. The mental projection about it, that if it is so, then it is beautiful. If it is not, it's not beautiful. Then they started branding things, that this is the style, that is the style, that is the style. And then you had to keep to their styles. And if you just try to avoid the styles, then you became a different person. And just to create a new styles, they just became like vagabonds, without any concern to reality or to the beauty that is auspiciousness. It is now for Sahaja-yogis to come out of all these nonsensical ideas and understand that it was just a mire of stupidity that we indulged into with our ego. We have to be very firmly standing on reality, which is auspiciousness itself. If it is reality, it must give vibrations. If it is unreal, it will not give vibrations. Like you can see, a flower which is plastic cannot give vibrations. A flower which is living gives you vibrations. To this purity of understanding, one has to rise.
So, in the remaining quarter of an hour, I think we'll go straight into the meditation and just experience the silence with it. We'll be playing some music, but as I always say, if you prefer quietness, then just turn the volume off. Okay, but it is beautiful music. So, thank you all for being here tonight, this session, and I hope to see you again in a fortnight's time. So, Jai Shri Ram.